Okay, so here we are, day three of the round of 32, but day two for us commentating on the round of 32. One thing I want to point out, I think is interesting, is I don't know why, but for some reason, this is the first World Cup that instead of us saying the Americanized version of country's name, we're saying, like, instead of Turkey, we're saying Turkey. I know that Mexico doesn't call us the United States; they call us the Los Estados Unidos, right? So we just kind of do that all over the world. I do think it's nice that we're saying Turkey instead of Turkey, for example. But when I was over in Cyprus a couple weeks ago, there's a little bit of tension between the Greeks and the Turks. They didn't say they were from Turkey. They said they were from Turkey. Even the Greeks are saying Turkey. So maybe to the Turkeyes, it's disparagement. And I only say that because today we have the Ivory Coast, right? And then I was looking at it going, oh, it's the, how are we saying that? The
Which one?
Coast,
Oh,
Ivory Coast.
yeah. Côte d'Ivoire.
Côte d'Ivoire, yeah, which I actually think is beautiful. I'm the guy. The other side of that is I'm the guy who can't say croissant or crescent. I got to say croissant because I had 3 years of French, and that's how you say it. It's croissant. So I totally get it, but it's just weird that it'd be nice if we all called each other by the names. But you hear that in newscasters too. They're talking with an English accent, and then when they get to a Mexican name or a Mexican word, they go David instead of David.
Yeah, exactly.
And what's funny about that is when I call my friends David, my American friends, I called him David because I think that sounds more fun than David's boring. So anyway, yeah.
Well, what's funny in the '98 World Cup, if you remember, the U.S. naturalized somebody last minute from France named Rigier, and I said at this point his name's Regis, and we got to quit calling him by his French name, Rigier, Regis, whatever. To Regis. Hey,
Right.
dude, you became American, now you're Regis. But also, it went to the Czech Republic, then it's Czechia now, right? And then Macedonia. A lot of people are insisting that they're called North Macedonia, but they're actually Macedonia. And the truth of the matter is some people get ripped for it, but the proper pronunciation is Macedonia. But everybody who says Macedonia is going to get teased by it. You know what I mean? So it's funny. And then you spell Brazil with a Z instead of an S when it's Brazil. So
Totally.
And just try your best.
I do that. I spell Brazil with an S. But in our transcripts for these podcasts or the closed captioning, it always spells it with a Z. It is funny for the simplicity of explaining things that can be interesting. Cyprus, when I told you I was going over to Cyprus a couple of weeks ago, which I said, oh, it's part of Greece. It's an island off of Greece or whatever. Because that's what my family had been telling me for years. Meaning my wife, my daughter's husband's family. His mom is Greek and his dad's Mexican. And so they've been telling me for years that my grandbaby almost is Cyprus, that he's half Greek, all this. I get over there and realize that that's how I get to Cyprus and realize it's its own country. You're Cypriot, you're not Greek. But they just didn't want to have to explain that to everyone that they met, even their close friends, apparently. But Cyprus is its own country. Now, don't get me wrong, huge Greek influence, Greek Orthodox Church, all of that stuff, but it's its own country, and they're Cypriot. So I've been telling you for years, my daughter's husband's half Greek, half Mexican. My grandbaby, she has this dark hair because she got it from a Greek ancestor, but it's technically they're Cypriot. So we are having a wokeness, if you will, in how we are learning more about other countries around the world and trying to pay, hopefully, mutual respect in how we talk about one another, which I think is good. It's a very positive thing. On that note, yesterday, the Netherlands game and Morocco, which we spoke about, you brought up on our pod yesterday that, hey, there's a huge Netherlands influence on the Moroccan team. And so my buddies, I'm in a texting group with them, men's group that I've been a part of since 1999, actually. Or wait, I think the first month of 2000, actually. And they were asking me about soccer. And I said, you know what? And I started telling them the story of how Morocco is, how tight they are with Greece, with rather the Netherlands and all this and that. And I said, I'm surprised the commentators aren't talking about this. You guys really need to get some knowledge from our pod, because we were talking about this yesterday. And a couple of my friends actually listened to our podcast yesterday and thought it was informal because they're trying to learn about soccer and the World Cup. But literally within 30 seconds after I did that, the commentator started talking about the connection between Morocco and Morocco and Netherlands. Sorry, I got Greek on the brain right now. So I was happy. The commentators, they're always looking for stuff to talk about because they have to fill dead air for as long as they can. They need to do more of
or
that.
they think they need to fill dead air.
They think they need to fill dead air. They think they're broadcasting on radio. But I think more of that, it makes it interesting, the cultural thing. And I wish where they missed the mark completely was talking about Japan and Brazil and the historical connection there is between those two soccer communities. That's our segue into that. And I will let you talk about that game after I just say my quicker piece about it, which is Japan played Brazil heads up. They just played them. They didn't pack it in. And it's one thing I think I've seen in the last few World Cups from Japan. That's how they play every game. They just go out and play. They typically, I don't remember them packing it in, playing low pressure against anybody. And they have surprised some really good teams, not just Brazil, but other teams in the last few World Cups. And their challenge has been inconsistency, because they'll have a great game against somebody like Brazil. Let's say if they would have won that game yesterday, which they almost did, right? And then they'll have a mess up in the next game that cost them to lose against Germany, right?
Yep.
Instead, what happened yesterday, they played Brazil straight up for 90 minutes. And then they broke down. They got broken down in the last few minutes of the game. Brazil turns out to be a huge advantage that they didn't go to overtime and that they didn't go to PKs, because those other games did. And those teams are worn out and tired after all of that.
Absolutely.
But I'll say one last thing about it is Brazil looked super sloppy so many times, trying to, even for them to control the ball out of the back or in the midfield, regain possession, regain composure. They quickly lost the ball right back to Japan, giving Japan lots of opportunities to have transition play goals, right? Starting in the midfield. Yeah, not even starting when they were back in their defensive third and just whacking the ball. They were intercepting sloppy passes by Brazil in the midfield, transitioning quickly. And I'll say one last thing. I'll be honest with you. I had so much work to do. I was out of town over the weekend. I do expert witnessing, so I was working on some cases and all this stuff. And so I'm watching the games over to my left a little bit, but I really had work I had to focus on. And so I didn't watch the Brazil-Japan game with as much intent and intensity as I wanted to. It was more like seeing the highlights out of the corner of my eyes. So I'm curious to hear, and this is what we're going to do today, curious to hear you review the Brazil game. We'll talk about the other two games, which were completely different. They were similar. They had their own thing, but the Brazil-Japan game was different than those two games. All three games were pretty darn exciting, even though there wasn't a ton of scoring. But all right, I know you're chomping at the bit, Zico. I want to hear from the true knowledge base here on, in his opinion, of Brazil and Japan.
Cool. Okay, so I will say that. Let me go back then to 2018. 2018, I want Brazil to play against Japan in the next round. Brazil is playing Belgium. I'm hoping that Brazil plays the next round. Brazil's made it through. And then Japan is playing Belgium. And I'm hoping that Brazil plays Japan, because Japan hasn't really quite stamped that they're world class yet. This is 2018. Japan takes a 1-0 lead. Japan takes a 2-0 lead. But Japan plays open, and two things. You tell me. Are they idealistic? Are they ignorant? Naive. Are they idealistic? Are they naive? So Japan takes 2-0 lead against Belgium, and they could have finished that game. Instead, they stay playing straight up, and that would be considered a bit of an upset. They're up 2-0, and you know what? They stay playing straight up, and they lose 3-2. We're like, really, Japan? Really? Because you would have been easy to beat in the next round. You would have been easy to beat. That's the one thing with the Japanese that I'll say is in the span of 30 years, they just have this. Boom! And why? Because they're idealistic and they stick to principles. Now, I will say, if you go back, I just agree with you. If you go back and watch actually, Brazil was better than they've been. It's just Japan put them in a tough spot. And you know this, score the first goal, dude. Score the first goal, especially if you're the better team.
Yeah.
And if you see highlights, everyone talks about it. Carlo Ancelotti was so cool. The goal happened. He stood up. He adjusted his belt as they was acting in front of the mirror. He adjusted his belt and he stood up and finally said some things. But he was so calm the entire time. And I think that helped bring a calmness to the game, right? You look at it in the second half, Brazil brought on 2 19-year-olds to win the game. In fact, they had a 19-year-old on, then they brought on another 19-year-old. So you're playing with 2 19-year-olds, which we would say are future superstars, to come back and win, if that makes sense. A lot of stats in soccer mean absolutely nothing. American sports are really built on stats. Let me say North American sports are really built on stats. But possession, okay, what are you doing with it? Now, what you were saying is right. What Japan did with their possession was they quickly countered, they went out. Now, if you watch the game, yeah, you say Japan didn't sit in. They did sit in this way, though. They showed Brazil so much respect out of the gate. It was surprising. Now, the old Brazil, I could see them doing it. Let's say this Brazil, it's really weird. It's growing right in front of our eyes, like one of those, the flower growing, and they speed it up 10,000 times. So you see a flower grow in the span of 10 seconds on a video. This Brazilian team is really growing. Long way to go right now, right? So what I'd say about Japan is they're very idealistic. And yesterday they played to win. Where 8 years ago against Belgium, dude, you're up 2-0. Keep at it. No, you're up 2-0 because Belgium's the better team and you got ahead and they're flustered. You got ahead again, but you stayed so openly naive that Belgium beat you 3-2. If Brazil went down 2-0 yesterday, we're dead. We're screwed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The other thing is the goal that you said is amazing. I would love people to go back and watch it. Japan's first goal, and here's the funny thing between the first 2 games also, Japan's first goal is they were playing deeper and Brazil was in their end. But then they got the ball into Brazil's end. And as they were about 10 yards across half, I'm going to say, off my memory, and I was emotional, as they got about 10 yards across on the Brazilian side, their left side, Brazil's right side, Brazil intercepted the ball within 10 yards of the halfway line, which is a good time to counter. Because Japan, when you're defending, you get tight. When you're attacking, you spread out, correct? So Japan had just gotten into this form and Brazil intercepted the ball. And so then, before Japan could really get back into this form, Brazil intercepted. Now Brazil was expanding. And so Danilo intercepted the ball, right? And now in Japan's like this, Japan's exposed. Danilo intercepts the ball. Brazil starts to break out. Now Brazil transitioning to this. And the first pass Danilo plays is a square pass. And Japan intercepts the next pass as Brazil has just gone from this, moving to this, and then they go and score. And my brother, Sean Careca, my older brother, said a brilliant point. He said, everyone's complaining about Casemiro. He should not have been on.
Everyone's complaining about who? I thought you cut out a bit. Everyone's
Casemiro. Everyone's complaining about Casemiro, Brazil's holding midfielder. But here's the problem. The guy who won the ball was Danilo. But with his second touch, he gave the ball back away to the other team. Here's the next thing. If I give the ball away, playing it forward, that's okay. But if I give the ball away playing sideways, east-west, you know what happens? I get beat, and the player I played it to gets beat because the guy intercepting it in the middle, his belly button's pointed that way, where both of our belly buttons pointed this way. So they say Gegenpress and also, right? It's press the immediately press back to win the ball back immediately. It's people understand at home. We call it a square pass, right? When you don't play north.
I remember when I first when I first got to Colorado, I started coaching with you back in '96 and Mark Francis, Preemy. And I was coaching the second team for U11s, and my son was on, he was coaching the first team. And we ran a session together, and he said to me, in the back, you never pass a square pass. In the back, in the midfield. That's the most dangerous pass because exactly what you said. He said, you either pass an angled pass backwards, because then if it's an errant pass, you have somebody back there who is in position. If you're assuming you're passing it at an angle back to someone, they're in position that if the pass gets intercepted, you have someone in position to stop it. Or you make an angle pass forward so that if it's a bad pass, you're in position to defend right away. And but Brazil is arrogant. They don't need to follow those basic soccer rules, man, because they never make a shitty pass square, right? They would never make that mistake in the
exactly. If you notice it, So it was Brazil was like, we got him. Like Brazil intercepted a sideways pass. So both Japanese players were beaten. But then on the next catch, Brazil played sideways pass and both Brazilian players were beaten. And then Casemiro, an old guy who's not near as fast, he's a World Hall of Famer for his pass, had to catch up 5-6 steps on a guy, could never catch up. And then, you know what happened? Angles so well. The ball misses Gabriel's heel, who tries to get sideways and wider by that much, and he goes inside the far post by that much. Perfect shot, perfect goal. And so that was the 29th minute. And what I was going to say about Don Carlo, Brazil's coach, is he stood up, he adjusted his belt, he said a thing or two, and he never quit chewing his gum. In a few minutes, he's sitting down with his legs crossed. And it just oozes so much calm. Like James Bond was a panic compared to Carlo Ancelotti. You know what I mean? And so
that's one thing you notice, because that is one thing I did notice. I remember looking at the corner of my eye going, this is different than the 2014 coach. The 24 when Brazil hosted the World Cup, that coach was all about emotion and passion, and he would have been yelling, "Come on, guys!" But they needed that calm, cool, and collected. I think to say, "Hey, we're Brazil. Let's not panic. Let's not rely on just our passion and get frustrated. Let's start playing better, gentlemen. Let's start playing."
100%.
And even though they did that, man, they kept you on the edge of your seat. Have no heart attack.
Exactly. People at home. I am 37 years old. Look what it did to me. I gained 10 years. Yesterday, and no question about it. And you and I know. So for people at home, my brother and I disagree on this, and we didn't have a chance to talk about it except for 1 minute. That there was an American commentator, and I'm not bashing American commentators. We have an American commentator who was saying something, and his analysis to me was very good, but he was wrong on one thing. Casemiro's old. Maybe Casemiro shouldn't have been on the field, but the mistake was 100% Danilo's, and that's what my brother said. He's 100% right. But in that game, I said that the American commentator was making brilliant points, and this is why. Please go back and watch it, guys. Brazil, as soon as they got right to the 36 yards, 35 yards out, there's a Japanese player there. And if you watch Paraguay against Germany, Paraguay was stepping up at about 30 yards out. And the problem is this. When I'm 3 yards from you and you're shooting from 32, 35 yards out, and I'm 3 yards from you, my body, if you go like this, hey, look how big I am. My body is so wide.
Switching your heads.
Yeah, correct. My body is so wide that you can't hit a 24 by 8 foot goal, because 3 yards is close enough to cut off the angle. And if you please watch Japan do it, watch the first half, watch the second half, watch at halftime on. As soon as Brazil's got the ball at that 36-yard range, and watch the glass, and they change 1 yard. I don't know, but they change 1 yard. There's the 18-yard box, and usually they have one line mode to the 6-yard box, one line mode to the penalty spot, one line mode to the 18-yard box. Correct?
Yep.
And so watch, in about 3 mode lines out, the light shade green, the dark shade green, like about 3 lines out, Japan would come and meet Brazil there. 36 yards out, there's Japanese player 3 yards in front of me. It is such a game of angles. It is incredible. And then Paraguay did that with 30 yards out. And when Brazil was dominant, you'll watch it. The guy that, and I'm going to say his name because it's a compliment, Landon Donovan said some brilliant stuff. But I was like walking around screaming in my hotel room, so it's not really a good thing. I'm like, Brazil, here's the other thing I want people to know. You've got to show that you'll shoot from 35 yards out. And what I said is this, though: shoot wide hit people, but don't put it over the bar. Show that it's, because if it's under the bar 8 feet high, it can deflect off a shoulder, it can do this. It could even hit somebody's arm that's out to the side. At that point, it takes a good bounce, it takes a bad bounce, but start getting it in. And he said some great stuff. He said they've got to shoot earlier from distance. And then the other thing I was thinking is just cross the ball. At the end of the day, Japan had 10 crosses, Brazil had 40 crosses. You've got to, and at some point in the second half, Brazil, 12 minutes in the second half, Brazil had 17 crosses, 17. And so that means in the last 30 minutes or 35 minutes, Brazil got 23 crosses in. Because, and this is what I'm going to say. Watch the first 2 games yesterday. Incredible.
Yeah.
One team is in the middle of the ring and one team is running around on the outside. Let's reverse and soccer it away. One team is backed up like this, rope-a-doping. So Paraguay was rope-a-doping, Japan was rope-a-doping, like people sitting back and countering, right? Playing on the counter.
Yeah.
And it's so effective because we live in Colorado. For the people who know, listen, it's nice to ski groomed runs because when you go fast, it feels great, right? When the better team goes fast, the lesser team gets beat. But when you drop and you put a bunch of trees in the middle of the run, and now you've got to start going like this, and you've got to slow down, you get bogged down. Come on, man. Germany got bogged down by a country, Paraguay, who has 7 million people. Brazil, Japan and Brazil are huge. Brazil's Brazil. Germany's Germany. And South Korea, Japan's never won a knockout game, ever. But we all know they're great. They're great. Paraguay, they've never been near anything in the World Cup. They got to the quarterfinals once, I believe. I'm just saying that. I believe that's what it was. And by the way, they should have beaten Spain in the 2002 World Cup that Spain won. They scored a legitimate goal that was ball offside. Would have put them up 1-0. And so that's the thing. Now, let me say one more thing about completing passes in soccer. So when you have people like this and you prioritize, we don't have to go defend them. The Japanese prioritize getting 35 to 36 yards out. Here's the next thing. When my team gets on top of your team and you're defending here, did you notice you have the ball for Germany and for Brazil the whole time? The 2 big central defenders. The central defenders are and I don't mean this rudely, this is a compliment. Your warriors, your donkeys, your fighters. Dude, I want you to have the ball. I don't want Vinicius Jr. to have the ball. I don't want Bruno Guimaraes to have the ball. Or I don't want your 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 to have the ball. I want your big lug defenders to have the ball. So if you notice, who was getting the ball for Brazil and for Germany? Their central defenders, 35, 36 yards out. And then a defender was getting within 3 yards, which, like I said, squish is big enough where you're not going to get a big, hard central defender scoring around a player from 36 yards out. But what I was saying is even miss that player. Drill somebody in the 18-yard box, keep it under crossbar. We're going to get rebounds or what have you. So what Landon Donovan said, they're like this. You got to play around them in cross, and you got to shoot before you get into that congested area. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I agree. And so many goals, and even if you watch EPL, so many goals are deflections. It's almost, I'm like, yeah, that's a strategy. I think someone's taking a brilliant shot that they put right in the upper 90. Nope. It hit off somebody's heel and bounced up to the upper 90. And that's how
that spin. Yep.
Yeah. And so so you're right. Low and hard and through the box, especially as wet as they try to keep those fields. It is such an advantage to shoot that ball, even if it hits the ground before it goes in the goal, can actually be an advantage if it's hit well because it's going to skip and be harder for the keeper to get it.
Hey, one last thing. One last thing. One last thing. You got to move on. Hang up. One last thing. The other thing is when you drop off, here's my own lane saying, it's common sense, but I like alliteration. Here's my own lane saying, speed needs space. Speed needs space. So what happens is these teams drop back onto their D, which the arc on the edge of the box comes to 22 yards out. So they drop back just a couple steps outside of their 18. Their keeper's up about 4 or 5 yards out. If the ball's hit over the 22-yard mark and hits the ground, and the keeper's starting at the 4 or 5-yard mark, that's only 17, 18 yards. It's going to skip to the keeper. The keeper's facing forward, so the ball's going at the keeper, skipping away, and the keeper, you can't drop a ball in there. So what happens when these teams drop off, and it's frustrating, you're going to see big teams get beat because speed needs space. And what happens is that speed gets negated.
Yeah.
One last thing.
So
you know what? If you give people the easy way out, they'll take it. So I get here, we have everybody defending. And if you play it between our tight 10 players, you might lose it. And then there's a counter. But now if we're all here and I allow you to play it sideways and complete your pass, sideways and complete your pass, back and complete your pass, you're going to do it. Does that make sense? So it mentally just wears you down where you're just trying to complete the pass and not give the ball away. Sorry, let's move on.
No, and what you're saying is interesting because I didn't think Japan packed it in as much as you said they did. Like I said, I wasn't paying attention as much to the details of the game as you did because I wasn't on vacation ignoring my family.
Correct.
Hopefully your family was watching the game with you.
Oh, they were. It's not good. It's not good. You know, when you get all that total fear in one room, we had it.
Yeah, the energy in there must have been intense. But I'm going to segue before. So what you said basically applies to the Paraguay game, right? Because that's what they did.
Yep.
Surprisingly, I think in the Netherlands, the Paraguay-Germany game was your very stereotypical one team playing low pressure and doing it. And I've done it as a coach. In fact, way back in the day, like in the early mid-90s, I coached developmental teams and I didn't recruit players. I had my own club in Kansas City, and I was going up against I'd always play against Andy Barney's team, and he was the recruiter. And to be fair, he did teach and taught players how to play, but he was a big-time recruiter. Every time we played them in indoor soccer, 6-on-6 with a goalie, right? It beat us like 8-1, 10-2. We'd get slacked, right? It's shellacked. One time, I was playing on an amateur team with him, and he decided to take over and coach. And we're playing indoor soccer, 6-on-6, keeper, 5 field players. And we're playing against a sponsored team in town that historically had been better than us. Although the next year we beat them for the championship. And I actually had the game-winning PK after double overtime. One of my glory day moments. But the first time we played this team called, one time we played this team called Lowenbrow, they were sponsored, a beer sponsorship, right? Every time we lost the ball, we packed it inside those 3 lines on the indoor field.
Absolutely. Yep.
The center, we packed it in. And these were actually small fields to begin with. All-American Indoor Sports Law next to Kansas had small indoor fields, smaller than a number of them that are out here. There's a small one in Boulder as well. But we packed it in the whole game. I can't remember if we won the game or not, but I remember it was close. And we were inside the 3 every time. And every time we lost the ball, Andy would be yelling, get back inside, back inside, back inside the red, back inside the red. So it even works as on a 6-on-6 is my point. Now, to Andy's chagrin, the next time I played his team indoors, that's how we played him. And he barely beat us 3-2. And I know he's sitting there going, damn it, Bradford actually learned something. And now I have a hard time beating him. But this is the deal. My parents were happy. Kids were happy that the game that we got that team, we only got beat 3-2, right? As a soccer purist, I was like, we're not necessarily getting better. I'm not developing players playing that way. I'm coaching to win, and at 10, 11, 12, that's not the best thing. Development is always winning is not always development, right? I wanted to take this moment before we talk about the Reds, talk about 3v3 soccer, because the more I watch 3v3 soccer, it exposes weaknesses. And meaning that, and we talked about this the other day, if I'm on an 11v11 team and we're playing against an opponent that's 10%, 20% better than us, that's even a possibility. Just as a generality, 10, 20%. They're more consistent on passing. They're that much more athletic than us. They're that much more technical. They're that much more tactical than us. I can pack it in, and worst case scenario, maybe lose 1-0, 2-0, 3-0. Best case scenario, we win 1-0, 2-0, 3-2, right? Best case scenario, I win that game because we packed in and we did that. In 3-on-3 soccer, where there's no goalie, where if we have a big box in front of the goal or a big arc in front of the goal that you can't just block the goal. You get exposed. And if you're playing in a game against a team that's consistently 10, 20% better than you, that means they're going to score a goal every 1 to 2 minutes. And the score is going to be 8-2, 8-1. Now, I think sometimes teams avoid 3v3 because they don't want to face that, because they don't want to be exposed, or maybe they don't see the benefit of 3v3 soccer because we're coaching the big 11v11 thing. I would tell you two things. As a coach, get your kids playing 3v3 in a competitive environment, because that's different than even practice, right? And prepare them that because some coaches hate losing, and we all hate losing. But if we're losing and developing, like I said, winning isn't always development, but development is always winning. And from the beginning of a 3v3 tournament to the end of a 3v3 tournament, my team gets better at quick transition, trying to control the ball and make quick little passes to win, trying to get back quickly and get shape quickly, trying to attack quickly. If we get better from the beginning of the tournament to the end of the tournament, we've won the tournament, right? We're winners in that. And I think that as a coach, I know I've coached teams. We lost 8 games and the parents could not be happier because they saw their player, their kid getting better week after week. And if you educate the parents of the kids you're coaching, they won't look at a game whether you won or lost it. They'll look at the game as, how did their kid do? What did their kid do better? How did they learn? Because we know you can win and use soccer by booting the ball down the field. So I say that for a couple of reasons. How do you break down a team that's packing it in? This is the other advantage to working on 3v3. You talked about speed needs space. The quicker you are at your touches, the quicker you are moving off the ball with intent, with deception, with creativity, the less space you need to be successful, right? And so when Spain, so if you're packing it in against Argentina, Messi wants the ball at the top of the box with 3 guys around him. Because when he gets that ball knocked to his feet, he's going to know who he can dump it off to. And when those 2 or 3 players commit to him, he knows he's going to be able to slide in a perfect pass that scores the goal. It's still hard. It's even hard for Messi, because I remember seeing Barcelona lose to Chelsea in the UEFA Cup back then, when Chelsea packed it in the whole game, and Barcelona couldn't figure out how to crack the code doing that. But one of the best ways to prepare your team to beat another team that's packing it in is 3v3 soccer, learning how to pass quickly, make quick decisions in quick, tight environments. And then I'll leave it with this on the 3v3 thing. You can't play brilliant 11v11 soccer, what we would consider brilliant 11v11 soccer, where you're possessing, quick passing, nobody can stop you no matter how much they pack it into their box, right? Brilliant 11v11 soccer. You can't play brilliant 11v11 soccer if you can't play brilliant 3v3 soccer, right? And whereas you can win 11v11 games and suck at 3, but you can't play brilliantly 11v11 because you might have 2 or 3 players on the field that can play at that level. So that's kind of my pitch for 3v3 soccer. And after we bought the company a couple of years ago, always loved 3v3 soccer. But the more I watch the games, the more I see teams, like I saw this happen Saturday, where a team's behind. So what do they start doing? They start just kicking the ball long down the field. That doesn't work in 3v3 soccer. It goes out of bounds. And I was like, no. No, you're down by 2 goals. If you want to come back and win this championship, you got to calm down, be composed, make quick, possess the ball and get down the field, not just whack it down. Because guess what? If you're not good enough to possess the ball and make little passes, you're probably not good enough to whack a ball to 30 yards with any amount of accuracy either, right? So with a perfect backspin, so it doesn't go out of bounds. Yeah, go ahead.
And let's say that. Let's change one word too. I would change one word that you're saying, and you're totally right. I know what you mean. Possessing in 3v3 soccer can be one good completed pass. 1 9-yard pass forward to the player in front of them because they're running maybe, or to their front foot, not even leading them, but to their front foot. That's it. And if you look at the Paraguay goal against Germany, and I tell everybody who's watching right now, just go and enter Paraguay Germany highlights. The Paraguay goal, come on, man, I'm forgetting his name. Great player, I'm forgetting his name, who played at Newcastle, Almiron. They're number 10, shocker. And Almiron suckers 2 players. He cuts this way. Both German players go this way. Then he chops the ball backward that way. Brits would call it a reverse pass. And what happens is when we coach, right? Because let's always teach principles of the game, right? You pressure, I support from behind, right? So you pressure, I cover. I pressure, you cover. What he did is he dribbled this way. Both Germans went to press, and they chopped it back that way. That's absolutely a 3v3 thing. It was actually an isolated 2v2 on the sideline. And so you're 100% right. When we say penetration, it's not only kicking the ball forward. Can we actually pass the ball forward, complete a pass forward, and then can we get bodies forward? And that's what these teams are doing, from low press to quick counterattack, getting bodies forward, right? Because we also call it inviting pressure, right? So you invite this pressure, and in 3v3, we know that happens. We're stuck in our own end. We're stuck in our end. If we win the ball and we complete one pass, guess what? There's a counter and we score. But it's not kicking. 2 weeks ago, I'm going to say it, in Superior, Colorado, we saw a girl, and by the coach's comment, it was very clear she was having a hard time with this. She's a bigger, stronger girl, athletic girl, fast, long legs. But she got the ball, and it was clear she had been doing this the whole time. 11 o'clock, so probably 2-3 games in, maybe for sure 3 games in, let's say. And she wound up stepping up to the ball and just smacking it one touch. And the coach, I'm making up the name, but Stella, let's pass that ball. It's just, I'm not even acting it well. The way he said it was very clear that Stella was having a hard time calming down and making a pass. And so the other thing is, you know what? You play 11v11, guys, and you know what it's called? An organized league in which there are, what's it called? Structured rules, officials, this and that. But you know what? 99% of the time, you have played pickup soccer until you got onto a competitive team. Pickup soccer is 3-on-3, 3-on-2, 5-on-2, 5 younger siblings against 2 older siblings. That's what typical soccer has been. So I agree. Yep. 3v3 exposes 11v11 players.
Yeah, and it does. And even more so than 6-on-6 indoor soccer with the Wolves does, because you can pack it in 6-on-6. Even 4-on-4. I feel like I would enjoy playing 4-on-4 more than 3-on-3 for this reason. I'm old and slow, and I want to be able to just drop back, receive a pass back, casually make the pass out to the right or the left. And when I play 3-on-3, I'm too old and slow to play 3-on-3. I don't want to play that fast, right? So I think that's one reason we don't get as many adult teams as we want out there, because they got to go out and run hard for 24 minutes. It's hard.
The more players on the field, the more downtime you have mentally and physically, the more players on the field.
Only. And so then it accelerates with 2v2 and 1v1. The problem with 2v2 and 1v1 is they're a little more one-dimensional. They're less dynamic as a 3v3, where there's more opportunities for runs, transition. They're just, it's a nice mix of that intensity without being so one-dimensional, or maybe, two-dimensional as opposed to three-dimensional. 1v1, one-dimensional. 2v2, two-dimensional. 3v3, three-dimensional, and it's more a microcosm of the actual game than 2v2 or 1v1 is, although I love 2v2 and 1v1 as a training tool and even as a competition. So all that said, Paraguay, again, traditionally, that's a traditional game where we just packed it in. Knew Germany was maybe stronger than us, and Germany could not figure it out. Why? And I think it works well against a team like Germany that isn't as technical and quick on the ball from their keeper to their forward, right? Meaning all 11 players, as maybe a Spain might be, right? Although Spain did have difficulty in the first round playing against a team that packed it in against them. I think they tied a game 0-0 even.
In last World Cup, Morocco packed it in against Spain and beat them that way too.
Yep. And so what the interesting game to me was that Netherlands game, because I agree with, I think it was, again, Henri Lawless, and who's the other guy, the big guy on TV? Yeah, Zlatan. It's so funny. You know that Ted Lasso had a version of him for 3 episodes. They got on the team, and he emulated emulated him when he played for LA. I loved it. Remember when he played for LA and all he did was complain about how stupid the Americans are? That's all he did. But he's like, man, you guys over here, you suck. You're lazy. You're not tough. He was just laying into us.
Well,
I love that guy.
Yeah, he's the soccer version of Chuck Norris. You know what I mean? Chuck Norris is gravity pulls the earth to him. The earth doesn't pull Chuck Norris, yeah, whatever. And it's very self-made, obviously, talking about himself in the third person and all. And you know what? When you're skillful and talented beyond belief, you can do that. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. And he backs it up with kicking ass and taking names, right? But this is my point. He said this thing with the Netherlands. He bit his tongue during the game. But at the end, he started to lay into them when they went to overtime. He's just, instead of Netherlands playing Netherlands soccer, somehow they've decided to pack it in and play defensively. And he just felt like they weren't playing their style of soccer because all of a sudden they lost their mojo. He didn't use these words, but they lost their mojo. They lost their confidence to play Morocco straight up, and they started packing it in. And he felt like that was a mistake. That's why they tied. That's why they went to overtime. That's why they went to PKs. So I'll say that. I also say, man, those Netherlands defenders, big, tall, lanky, strong, fast dudes that try to play cleanly. They get back and they pull hard, but they get back and tackle from the side, not from behind. And it was beautiful to watch Netherlands play. Also beautiful to watch Morocco play. And that game went the way. That was what's confusing about the game. I expected Morocco to pack it in. Netherlands looked for the counterattack, but it seemed like they played straight up. And then at one point, Netherlands started being afraid to lose instead of playing to win. Did you see that when you watched that game?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The Dutch didn't have the mojo. Absolutely. What they've called the Dutch before are Germans with flair. Yeah. They're so tactically aware and understand the game so well, and they teach the game so well, and they are so clean in their technique. The Dutch are like that. But then again, you take relationships and you bring relationship into the event, good or bad, let's say, and people get emotional, right? And so, like they said, 3 of the Moroccan players have played for Dutch youth national teams. The Moroccan player who scored their tying goal, the header, played for the youth Dutch national team and won, I forget, a U17 UEFA championship or whatever with them. So there's so much this thing, do you know what I mean? Where let's say like sometimes people say,
like I was saying yesterday, like you were saying, whether you and I know this, when you play against your friends, you play harder than you play against. You don't try to hurt them. You play hard as you can, as you would, just even harder sometimes than you would against your enemy. It's my friend. 100%. I know and so whether or not they were friends or enemies or frenemies going into that game, it was going to be an emotional, intense game. And it did not and I think you pointed that out yesterday was big.
Yeah. How many times did the players change shirts because of blood? 3 or 4 times, I think. And one guy, his shirt was
the bloodiest match. It was the bloodiest match of the World Cup so far. It's the bloodiest match, literally.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. One of the defenders, a big defender for Netherlands, man, I felt bad for the guy. He's like bleeding, he's getting hit in the face, and he's just getting up, and he's not. And the thing is, he still didn't lose his composure. He still didn't. I think a lot of countries, whether it's an Arab country, the U.S., a Latino country, they would lose their minds once they're getting beat up that much by a forward and probably get a yellow card. And that guy he continued playing hard. He kept his composure, and he just went, Leo, what is going on, man? I'm getting murdered out here. Right? Come on. He did, but he kept his composure. So the Netherlands, I think they failed to have confidence that they could win. They probably needed Brazil's coach. All right, so we need to move on. We have Ivory Coast, or Côte, say it for me again.
Côte d'Ivoire.
The Côte d'Ivoire against Norway. That should be interesting. We got France against Sweden, Mexico against Ecuador. I think when I look at those games today, I think you probably in the Norway game. Norway, they've got their big forward guy, but they were kind of they don't always make the World. They don't always make the World Cup, so they're not one of the top. They're not one of the 5 top teams, right? And so that could be a really good game, right? Ivory Coast against Norway, that could be tight. Ivory Coast, African team, they're probably going to have some big defenders that won't be so bullied by Holland. Maybe a Japanese team might be, or even an American team might be to some degree. Then you have France, Sweden. Sweden's got a history of soccer. They're always good. But they've always hung out in that. They're like a top 20 team. It seems like for 50 years, Sweden's been a top 20 team, but where you got to play them well to beat them. They're not nobody, but I don't think they've ever made it to the big stage or the big game. I don't even know if they made it to the Final Four, but so France is certainly favored there. They're probably a better team. Mexico, Ecuador. Is Ecuador, is that a CONCACAF team? Or I'm horrible at geography. Where's Ecuador?
Yeah, South America. CONMEBOL,
Okay.
South America.
Gotcha. So that's going to be a good game because Ecuador is not nobody. And so it seems like we have some evenly matched games today that maybe you won't see as much of that pack in it in looking for the counterattack. Just at first glance, that's what I see. But what do you see?
Yeah.
And give us some historical, if you have any historical context for some of those. And we're already going over time, but maybe 10 more minutes for you to break down those games for me, because you're going to do a much more insightful job than I just did.
I'll give you 3 minutes total because I got to go do soccer with my kids. So here's the thing I would say. Norway have Holland. Holland is a powerful goal scorer. Holland gets behind people. He holds the line, they say, or leads the line really well. He's always trying to get behind the defenders. And if the Ivory Coast defenders can manage not to be caught flat and a ball be played through, because that's very, I think, I almost favor Ivory Coast at that moment. But I favor Holland to get through a back four that's caught flat and score a goal. I favor Holland to do that. If he doesn't do that, I favor Ivory Coast to win. The next thing is that if they get into added time, if they go into 30 overtime, I see Ivory Coast as having even a better chance, because now we're talking about 120 minutes of soccer. I don't know. For some reason, I thought the game was in Texas. I don't know where it is. If it's a warm venue and they go into 120th minute, where are they playing? Do you know? If it's a warm venue and they go into 120th minute, I give it to Ivory Coast. If they go into overtime, I give it to Ivory Coast. I do think Holland will get a goal because I think Ivory Coast will get caught out once. That's my opinion. Ecuador, Mexico, I think.
And you know what? You're right. They're playing in Arlington. So it's going to be very hot.
That's what I thought. Yeah. So
and Ivory Coast can be much more used to heat than Norway.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Ivory Coast is pretty much on the equator.
And they're playing at 1 o'clock. Wait, but is that game air conditioned? Is that Dallas? Is that the?
Oh, yeah.
That is. That's the air conditioning field for that. Because the Cowboys are so tough.
Which I think is great. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. No, I think that's right too, because you're going to be, then it's like, why don't you play World Cups when it's 30 degrees out so that Norway has a better chance? Why don't you play World Cup when it's 100 degrees out so that Ivory Coast has a better chance? So yeah, if it's air conditioned, that makes a difference. If they go into added time, that takes a lot of what I said away. If they go into added time, if it was hot, I would give it to Ivory Coast. I do think that there'll be one breakdown. Holland will score a goal because he's so proven. The funny thing with Holland, though, is he doesn't have the support here that he does at Man City. So it's actually harder here than Man City, you would say. And then Ecuador and Mexico, which I think you listed as the third game, actually. Again, I'm going to say both teams can defend well. Mexico's
and they're playing in Mexico City. They're playing in Mexico City, so big home crowd for Mexico.
At altitude. And so here's the funny thing. Home crowd for Mexico, but Mexico hasn't had the toughest group. It was proven to not be a good group. Mexico's given up 0 goals in 3 games. But when you play at altitude in Mexico City, the problem is Ecuador is even higher. Ecuador's got even more altitude. They've got a field in Ecuador that's 9,300 or 9,400 feet. And so that's pretty brutal, where Mexico City 6,000 feet, right? And so Ecuador can take that. But I think athletically, both teams can defend, but Ecuador is just athletically better. They are. So I think it's not going to be a beautiful game. It's going to be a brutally hard game. If there's a red card or two, what's your over-under on 1 red card? What's your over-under on 2 red cards? I think Ecuador is going to win an ugly game, but I don't know. I just feel that an ugly game, 1-0. In fact, I predicted 2-0 because they'll get a late counter goal or whatever else. You're splitting hairs somewhat, but I know Ecuador is just athletically better, quicker, faster, let's say. And then France, Sweden, I think that Sweden will maybe hang in there for a while, but in the end, I think that France will run away with it. I just see that Sweden, I think, will be slow, too slow. France has a bunch of track stars, to be honest. I think they'll be slow, too slow. And France, for only about 8 years, has played a counterattacking style, which is lame. They've had superior athletes, a superior team, and played an absolutely counterattacking style. Really pathetic soccer in so many ways. Now I think they're going to just bully Sweden. And I think they'll run away with that game, to be honest. But
well, and I think that Sweden's one of those teams that's good enough, that believe they're good enough to win. And so they're not going to play low pressure and pack it in their box. They're gonna have maybe the pride of the history of their country. We're not gonna do what Paraguay did. There's a couple other teams that did that, where they just packed it in and held on for dear life. Sweden's got a little too much pride, a little too much soccer history to do that. They're probably gonna try and play them. Maybe they play a little low pressure, not challenge until just inside the half or halfway, just outside the defensive third. But that's just my generality. I don't know for sure. But if they do that, the challenge for them is, because of the athleticism of France, is now a counterattack is a big, strong, fast, skillful counterattack. Probably the most dangerous. One of the more dangerous counterattacks is going to be France, because they're going to be very direct. They're not gonna dick around. Sometimes Brazil gets bogged down in a counterattack because the guy wants to touch the ball 3 times before he pass forward. Sometimes, not always, but
correct.
Sometimes. Yeah. All right. So France, so Ecuador 2-0, Norway, Ivory Coast. You're not calling the score, but you're saying probably Norway, and then France could be a blowout unless it goes completely against what, and a blowout meaning a dominant 1-0, 2-0, 3-0 performance.
In our family
3-1,
I predicted. In our family pool, I predicted France 3-0. I totally hope I'm wrong, but I predicted France 3-0. Ecuador, I don't know why I gave them 2 goals. They don't score 2 goals, but Mexico's going to have the pressure to win the game, and if they fall down 1-0, to tie the game. And I just think somehow, I don't know, Ecuador maybe counters later or whatever and win 2-0. I don't know. And Ivory Coast, the longer the game goes, the better for them, I think.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I might be totally wrong.
Of course, that's what it just occurred to me a couple of years ago. I think last year. Why do we watch sports? Why is it so intense? It's because we don't know what's going to happen. Some of the best movies in history have a surprise ending, right? Oh man, you don't want to spoil that movie. Yep. I don't want to know what happens at the end.
Yep.
Because that makes the movie more exciting. But most movies are predictable. Okay, he's gonna get his revenge, and he's gonna kill the bad guy in one fight. And by the way, he's gonna look like he's losing the battle. Arnold Schwarzenegger's about to get beat, but then he comes through at the last second and destroys the Predator. All that. It's predictable. By the way, when it's not, and the movie has a sad ending, I'm disappointed, because I expect the movie to give me a happy ending, because that's why I watch the movie.
I know.
Right? But sports is unpredictable. Nobody knows. That's why we play the game, right? You just never know.
Again, I'll say, same as yesterday. The Bible, the fight's not to the strongest, or the race to the swiftest every time. You know what I mean? It's not always to the strongest or to the swiftest. Sometimes, how did that happen? The Paraguay game yesterday, like, how did that happen? But then when you go back and you look at it, you know what? They played it perfectly. Wow. How did that happen? And you know what? And there's a point there where I'm like, you know what? This is not going to happen against Japan. And you look at so many of those games and quote unquote upsets. There were almost 3 upsets out of 3 yesterday, to be honest.
Yeah.
There are almost 3 upsets out of 3.
Sure. Yeah, there was. Yeah. The other thing I'll say, that the Norway Morocco was the worst demonstration of how to take penalty kicks ever. That was the ugliest PK shootout I've ever seen. I think each team scored 2 of their 5 shots. And to be fair, there were 1 or 2 keeper saves in there, but some guys are hitting posts, guys are missing wildly on their shots. Yeah. It was an ugly PK.
Yeah, and don't blame Norway yet. Netherlands. And
I meant to say Netherlands. Yeah.
That's the bummer, is pressure makes cowards of us all. That's what they say, right? And to me, it's not bad. If I'm going to be a coward, no problem. I would drill the ball, and I'd drill it chest high down the middle usually, especially when you start seeing that the keepers dove the first 3 or 4 times. The keepers are getting to the corner. They're diving. They're choosing right or left and diving. If you're scared, take away the touch thing and don't put it 1 inch inside the post. Instead, drill it safely under the crossbar, but drill it down the middle. That's my 2 cents, man. The point being is, you'd rather make an ugly penalty kick than miss it by hitting the post, even though it was the inside the post. Doesn't mean anything if it doesn't go with.
I know. Yeah. Even that keeper saved a shot and then kicked it in. That the Netherlands keeper. But yeah, the Netherlands and Morocco, not a great job on their PKs. And I say that because the teams I played for, I would get selected to take the PK because it was something I practiced. And I just looked at it as I just got to place the ball. I got to pick a corner, put it in there as hard as I can while also maintaining the control of it. But I see PKs as like free throws, but it can't get in your head. And boy, it's man, I can't imagine the pressure of your whole freaking country taking a PK. How are you not stressed out? Even Messi missed the PK, right?
Yep.
So yeah, it happens to us. All right, man. So fun games today. We'll talk tomorrow morning. I'll probably have this all launched here, hopefully before the games start today. But yeah, and I take it that you're watching the games. You're on vacation, but you guys are taking breaks out of the day to watch all the games, or are you getting away for a while?
I don't know if I said this yesterday. If I did, I'm sorry for repeating it, but I didn't think a whole lot of it. But I'm a bad packer, and so I just took a nice thick Brazil sweater, a thin Brazil sweater, Brazil muscle shirt, Brazil short sleeve shirt, Brazil long sleeve t-shirt, and a couple Brazil pants, and then 3/4 pants, and then that's it. And then yesterday I'm like, dude, I'm going to have to go to the dollar store and buy a couple plain white USA 50th anniversary shirts because my team's going to lose here. I didn't even think about that. And so what we did is we watched Brazil, and I decided that yesterday was a windy day. We watched Brazil, and no matter what, we're going to do our train ride. There's a historical train ride here. We're going to do our train ride after the game because if we lost, I need to get out, get in a train, go through the forest, and get some fresh air and publicly cry. Better than sitting in my dark room listening to Pink Floyd or whatever. And so I decided I got to go. And so I thought I'd be crying on the train, but getting some fresh air. And if we won, it would be the joy train, the love train. You know what I mean? And so we won. So but we watched Brazil, and then I turned off my phone, which as an addict, it's hard to turn off your phone. I turned off my phone, went on the train, got no text, no anything, and thought when I get home, I'll watch Paraguay, Germany, and Morocco and France. And what a day. Watch my team comes back and wins, go on the train with my family, come back, and then 4 more halves of soccer, actually plus an overtime, plus 2 overtimes. So 6 more halves of soccer pretty much. So what's better than that? I actually fell asleep though, because you don't realize how stressed you are. And I was so stressed that actually even on the train, I was so happy, but I was yawning because I had been so stressed during the Brazil game. So we watched Brazil, went on the love train, and then came back and we watched 6 hours of soccer until 1 a.m. or whatever. So wonderful vacation.
So I'm going to challenge you on one thing. So I snowboard a lot, and I go up, and I think when you snowboard, you need to wear the proper gear. You're more comfortable, you're safer, you're warmer, you're drier, all that stuff. So I've got great gear head to toe. But sometimes I'll wear my Mahomes jersey over my Burton coat or a thinner coat underneath, depending on the weather. And when they played Tampa for the Super Bowl, I think that was right before COVID, I was up in Vail, and the day of the game, I'm going down the mountains underneath the lifts with my Mahomes jersey on, and people are shouting, "Mahomes, Mahomes!" I'm like, "Yeah, that's right, man. We're gonna kick Tom Brady's ass." I'm boarding down. Yeah, look at me. The next day, after we lost to Tampa miserably, I get up. I'm like, I have a choice here. I can put the Mahomes jersey away, or I can wear the jersey, not be a fair weather fan, have some pride, right? Have some dignity. And I wore the Mahomes jersey the next day, and nobody said anything to me, positive or negative, thankfully. But I was just like, I still love the Chiefs, even though they lost the Super Bowl horribly to Tampa. So I would challenge you, if Brazil would have lost yesterday, not to go buy clothes, but wear that. And nothing else. You're walking around Brazil on yesterday if they would have lost, and people would have been like, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You've got empathy and sympathy from people all around you all day. So stick with it, man. Come on. You can't be a fair weather fan. You gotta lean in. And I know you're not, but
It's just people don't like to see a grown man cry in public. Let me tell you this. Yesterday morning, there was a guy who walked by to get coffee who had his German shirt on. That was a little bit of the interruption when we were doing this podcast. He walked by and he had his German shirt on. And so I'm here even earlier this morning getting ready for our podcast, and the German guy hasn't come by. Poor guy. His shirt away.
Germans never be... No, well, a German guy could never be seen crying in public. That'd be worse. A Brazilian could. He has passion and heart.
Emotional.
And
yeah.
Not a German.
And I'll say this. Here's one thing that I am not. I am not a smack talker. I never talk to anybody. Never talk smack afterwards. And what you said, I feel empathy for anybody because I know how I feel. And I would never say anything negative to somebody about their team losing or whatever. In fact, you're right. I would actually say, dude, I'm so sorry, man. So sorry, because I understand how it feels. But I'm going to go do soccer with my kids. Cool?
All right. Have fun, man. That's why I don't watch very much soccer. I'd rather play than watch. So I'm with you 100%. Correct. All right. Hey, love you, brother. We'll talk tomorrow. All right. Cheers.